Good morning or afternoon to everyone. If you know what time it is of course Biden time. I am Christian Bladt. With me is Tamra Brown
Morning.
and Scott Moore, the Yes
Hey
Man.
everyone. That's right.
So Tamra, you were unable to be with us last week because you have a job, whatever. But there's some more I think that we need to talk about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, but you didn't get to weigh in on that last week. So just big picture, your thoughts, how those thoughts have possibly changed over the course of the past week or so, and just what you think about it in general.
Oh boy. Well, this withdrawal. I guess after 20 years, they the top intelligence decided that we're not going to make any more progress than we have, and so now is as time as good as any, I suppose, is what their thought process was. But the fact that the Taliban moved in so quickly and they are somehow surprised by that, that's what I don't understand. So that, and I mean, it, the White House's position of you know, whoops, we weren't expecting this. It seems to be like they're where was this lack of intelligence? Why was this lack of intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what we were talking about last week. Just sort of the idea of, I mean, my thinking was the return of the Taliban would be inevitable, but the fact that nobody realized that it happened this quickly, that it was like in a long weekend, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hey, did somebody change the flag? And it was really quick.
And I'm glad that
And
they're granting asylum for, the the translators and the people that worked with the American government, and they've made it clear that they're getting all of the Americans out of there. Um, it's just a matter of it just so typically American, the thing that we do, just leave countries in ruins. But if as long as we're granting asylum to any Afghan citizens who worked with our government. I think that is happening now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're not going to be able to get everyone out, which is going to be a problem. I think that the focus should really be on, obviously you want to get the Americans and all of our allies, all the Westerners out, but as you're able to read earlier today, it's getting increasingly difficult for anyone, including Westerners, to get to the airport. And there's this deadline of August 31st, which is
another arbitrary deadline.
Well, sure, but that's the deadline, and President Biden is not looking to go past that. The Taliban are not going to really feel good about any attempts to go past it. They're not really. There's not really a lot of good faith coming from the Taliban right now. Scott, what are your thoughts? I mean, in the week since we last talked about this, there's thousands of people have gotten out, but not anywhere near as many, I think, as were promised would get out in the past week.
No, I mean the numbers are rising, which is good. I think we had, close to 70,000 over the past 24 hours. There's been also some pushback, and you've seen some pictures of empty planes as well. But overall, it's just trying to stop the visuals and the optics of it looking terrible. But in the week since, we've learned, yeah, basically, essentially what Tamara was saying. It's like, how did we not think that the government was going to hold, and that the Taliban was going to take over so quickly? There's a lot of layers. Again, we've talked about this, and really it goes back to 20 years ago. It goes back to the initial, that we went in there and we were supposed to go in for a particular reason, and then it turned into nation building. and democracy. And we said this last week, once you get in somewhere, it's a lot harder to leave. You end up pulling out with a vacuum. And the two options were not tenable. It's either you're there forever, to some capacity, or you're going to have to leave, and trying to leave and it not being so chaotic, but there was going to be a level of chaos regardless of when you left or how you left. It was just is it less chaotic? And unfortunately, it ended up being more chaotic in this case. And to Tamara's point, it's like we kept this arbitrary date in there. And the Taliban is basically holding us to this date, saying if we stay there after August 31st, it could potentially lead to violence. And again, there's both sides to it. Some say we should stick to it and get out of there. Others say that if we allow them to dictate the terms, that it makes us look weak. Either way, you're not going to get people that are going to agree, especially armchair quarterbacking. But again, there are a lot of issues with it, but there's no clear, great option to work with here. And we've seen that. It's those are the two main options. That's it. You stay forever or you have to leave. There's no really in between. It's just it is a cascade of failures across multiple levels to see how we did not see this coming, that the Taliban was going to take over so much quicker than we anticipated. And we also have learned too that the Biden had met with the former president back in June of Afghanistan and had talked about having people pull out sooner, but he thought that would look bad on his government, saying that we didn't have faith in them to be able, which we didn't, as it turns out, to be able to stay in power. And if we had started pulling more people out earlier, it would have looked like we were basically admitting defeat. So, there's really no great, easy answer, even, now looking back at the past week, learning more from when we talked on how this could have gone better or not. So there's really no winners in this situation at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody's coming out ahead in all this, it's the Taliban, but they're not quite there yet. This is a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking, because it involves the hypothetical of basically switching your quarterback. There's the theory out there that while no president would be able to really break the will of the Taliban and change their mind outright. But Tamara, do you think that they might be they would have cut a little bit more slack to any request, maybe for, hey, we need an extra week, if it had come from former President Trump, only because of the fact they're like, this motherfucker is crazy. We don't know what he can do. Uncle Joe, he's just Uncle Joe. We're not scared of Uncle Joe. Do you think, and it doesn't let's start with Trump, but do you think that they would have been more scared of another president? Or do you think that they're behaving the way they are because, look at Biden?
Oh, I mean, certainly Trump spins it that he would be the guy that they would be able to sit down with and make some sort of have some conversation with. I don't understand that what, the Taliban does not have the resources that the American government has. So the fact that the Taliban is as powerful as they are is something that I don't understand. They are able to, seize areas. They are able to wield a lot of power for having very, very minimal resources. And that is extremely interesting. So, I mean, yeah, I do feel like I'm Monday morning quarterbacking, because it makes no sense. Every person trying to analyze the situation and understand, how is this happening? How is it that the most powerful military in the world didn't know what the F they were doing? How is this possible? But
right. I mean,
again, we find ourselves in the same situation again.
Yeah, our military and then our very expansive intelligence network. Obviously, there can be questions about what was passed along and who made decisions and all that. But yeah, I think that as they say, it's a bad look for the United States to have something go so poorly. But we were saying this a week ago, Scott. It's just every time that Biden comes up to that podium and he gives some canned remarks, some prepared remarks, and doesn't take questions, it's not conveying a show of strength. I think that if you are still in Afghanistan, there's also the question of, there were several times throughout the summer. There was, I can probably look it up. There were several dates where everyone was told, like, you probably want to leave. This is but there's still thousands of people there. And I don't know. Maybe I've missed those videos. Is there like a Club Med in Kabul that I just didn't realize was there? Is there a Hard Rock Cafe that I didn't realize? I'm not sure why people are not still there now. But even why did you stick around a month ago? I'm not talking about the military, obviously. It's not their choice. But civilians who are still there, it's like, how much money did you think you were going to make? Scott, how do you think they sort of the PR, but also the confidence in our leadership has swayed in the last 6 days since you and I talked about this?
I mean, in general, in this, or with our allies in Europe?
I think our allies in Europe, and then obviously just in general, people here. But let's start with our allies, and then expand that to just general.
Well, I'd say, for our allies, it's definitely a touch point, because they, and rightfully so, have asked that we extend past this August 31st deadline, because what happens in Afghanistan, it will eventually, with migrants and leaving the country, will eventually affect most of Europe. And it's a bit different than us, where, again, we can be isolated from having to deal with the repercussions of this. So a lot of the EU and former EU members like the UK have asked us to extend that. And I do think it does hurt us a bit with those allies, because they do see that what's going to happen in their back door is going to eventually affect them more than us. As far as us at home, as we said about last week, it's a ego bruise for American citizens when they see, after 20 years, we are always told, I don't want to say it's propaganda, but it's like America's number one, and America can go in and do anything, and everyone's going to want to be like us and with us. And we've talked about this time and time again, that our system of government and our version of democracy it's not a one size fits all. It does not work everywhere around the world. And we have continued to do this year after year, decade after decade, thinking that we can reshape countries around the world into our image, and it just doesn't work. And once again, we're seeing this clearly, like we saw in Vietnam, like we saw in Iraq. We can't go in and make these changes. And so it is a little bit of an ego bruising to most Americans to be like, we've spent 20 years here, and it's basically going to be back to where it was 20 years ago, with the same type of leadership and government style that we defeated in 2001. So it is a very tough thing, and I do think it is going to affect us. As far as the long-term effect for Biden and the Democrats, again, a majority of people still wanted us out of Afghanistan. So I think they're reading the tea leaves and feeling that if they can at least make this second part of evacuating Americans and getting, the Afghan interpreters and people that have worked with us out of the country safely and effectively and smoothly, then that part will look better in the longer run, and that the majority of Americans do support this decision of leaving the country. And we now have short-term memories now and distractions, and there'll be something else shiny in the next few months that is going to distract people, sadly, and people are going to move on from this moment if we can have a smooth transition, which it's been somewhat messy, but that's what's going to affect people's long-term thoughts on how this went. And it may not hurt the president as much as it may seem right now.
Well, I mean, that's the reality of it, which is obviously unfortunate and tragic for the Afghan people. The majority of us here are not directly impacted by this in literally any way at all. in other than we hear about it and we, see news coverage of how terrible it's going. But yeah, it's there's it's not something that necessarily has the staying power, but obviously, to talk about the politics of it, Republicans are, of course, very interested in trying to keep this story around for another year plus, and they'll combine it with other things, but they really want to use this for 2022. But it's, it's really, even if you hate Nancy Pelosi, what was her role in this? I mean, if you don't like Democrats, the House isn't really involved in this, except for the two geniuses, Representatives Moulton and Meijer. They took a trip to Afghanistan, a freelance trip that was, unapproved and off the books, as it were. Not quite sure what they were looking to do, but so that they've directly impacted it because, as Pelosi, as Speaker Pelosi pointed out, protecting them suddenly takes manpower away from the whole thing that everybody's criticizing them for, which is getting people out of there. But obviously this is bad for Biden, but the first Iraq war in 1991 was seen as good for George H.W. Bush. People, his approval ratings were very high. So it was a long time before people actually have to vote for another Democratic president. And I'm sorry to all of our Q viewers. I know that August is almost over, and I know it hasn't gone the way that you thought it was going to go. But we're here for you.
I was going to say that's a very good point when you think about that, because George H.W. Bush had approval ratings much like his son, near 90% after the war, and then he lost re-election a year and a half later.
I reference this sketch often, but I remember a Saturday Night Live sketch in the fall of 1991, and it was a pretend talk show with all, it was like a Paul Tsongas impression and I don't know, a bunch of Lamar Alexander, all these people. And it was, the show was called figuring out who's going to lose to Bush, because the idea that George H.W. Bush would have lost just a short year later was preposterous, and, but you're right. And, and his son's approval rating was also very high at different points. But I don't know. I mean, he didn't really come close. I think when the dust settled, it's not like John Kerry was close, from the way I remember it, electorally or vote count wise.
He was close.
He was close. Okay.
Close. Oh yeah. It was like 285 electoral votes. It was very close. It was down to
Ohio, that is close. So you're right.
It was closer than the Trump Hillary, closer than Trump and Biden. So it was very, very close.
Yeah. So that's that's old stuff. But anyway, no, I'm glad you corrected me on that. But so that's the point, though. It's it is a snapshot. The obviously certain media outlets are happy to tell you about Biden's plunging poll numbers. I think that there's also this idea of Biden really has to avoid having another hostage crisis like what faced Jimmy Carter. I'm like, 1979 was a really different world. There's not going to be hostages. If they take Westerners, they're not holding them hostage for political reasons. I think it's just a series of beheading videos, unfortunately. I'm not even remotely trying to make light of it, but I don't see the Taliban as like, well, we're going to take a lot of hostages. They don't strike me as that's really their end game. And tied to that is something I wanted to ask. I'll ask you first, Scott. There's a lot of rumblings about this idea that obviously seeing this reemergence of the Taliban and how quickly it was is something that is probably encouraging to ISIS, who we don't hear that much about. A few different presidents have told us that they've wiped them out, but they're still there. And how real I was reading about this in the New York Times earlier. How much do you see that personally as something that's sort of like the next series of problems after this?
Well, so we talked about last week is the Taliban's trying to be on a PR mission to be the kinder, softer, gentler version this time around from 20 years ago. And they have their own issues
The
to deal with.
the people's Taliban.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we'll shoot you before we behead you. Okay.
Exactly. But they are trying to, they crave legitimacy, and that's what they're going for right now. And they have their own issues with areas and other portions in Afghanistan too that want to take over and are even more extreme than they are. So it'll be interesting. And I was saying this to someone the other day. How will we interact with this government going forward? Will we work with them as a partner to help root out some of the more extreme than them that are trying to take over in parts of Afghanistan? And how is that going to look in the longer term? And will they be, because again, they crave legitimacy, they crave that being seen as the government. Will they take steps to help put out some of the fires of these more extremists that will also try to take over? And will they try to tamp that down as well? So, there are, again, some weird collaboration things that might happen in the months ahead in order to keep some of these more extremist things down. So it wouldn't surprise me if there is some work even behind the scenes with Taliban officials, even if it's not directly through us, but if it's through some back channels of diplomacy, to make sure that we do keep some of these things in check. Because again, we don't want to have to be dealing with things down the road that we're going to have to not even just for our own safety, but just for interests overseas as well. So we'll see how that works out in the next few months on the legitimacy and how we do interact with this new government that's trying to be put together.
So you're saying like the Taliban is like a record label, and they're gonna sample ISIS on this track, and then they're gonna sample this more extremist branch on another track, and they're gonna put in this little this mix that we're gonna see.
You should think of it as early 2000s Puff Daddy and the Family. You're basically like, you can deal with Sean Combs, but I don't know about the rest of them. Tamra, to this extent, we're talking about this. I like the term that you use, the people's Taliban, the kinder, gentler Taliban. But the Taliban leadership is telling Afghan women, by the way, you should not go to work because we can't trust our soldiers to respect you. So I don't know how kind and gentler this takeover is about to become, but this sort of, I don't know, I feel like, there's mixed messaging is really what I think we're continuing to get. And do you see, I don't want to ask what the worst case scenario is, because some of that's obvious, but do you see any way that this can go even reasonably well, once our continued pullout over the next week, and then once we're actually gone?
I mean, that's one of the biggest tragedies of this is there are vulnerable people, women, young, kids who will be recruited, women who will be assaulted. There are vulnerable people who have been vulnerable. It's not that things have improved. We're largely improved by the American occupation, but it's, I mean, the vulnerable people is what we need to realize is the tragedy of all of this. And the frustration that we're all feeling is that we don't know what to do about that. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the hardest part, is that there's a lot that we can assume is going to be happening now.
Yeah, no, I think that it's again, it's I think that when you're on the opposition and your job is to find things that the White House, etc., have done wrong, it's very easy to point to this. But is this the big ticket item? And what's the staying power in this disaster? And I think that if Biden continues to not take questions ever. And then of course when he does take questions, they're always quick to point out that it's a pre-approved list. But that's obviously nothing compared to our previous president, who would always call on One America News Network. But to be fair, at least sometimes President Trump would pick on a lot of people, but he would choose someone who was not friendly to him. And Biden doesn't seem to be doing that. Although, I don't know, Scott, it's the media is not particularly friendly towards him. And some people are upset by it. I'm like, oh, I don't know. I think some of them are maybe doing their job and, holding this leadership to the same standards that they've held previous. Anybody that's watching this, anybody that's tweeting at us, whatever, I'm sure you can find exceptions to it. But in general, I think that the coverage is negative is because this is going badly.
No, absolutely. And it is. And, we touched on this a little bit last week too. It's sort of like, but the media wants to also be seen as not just in the back pocket of Democrats and the liberal elite, because that's what it's always looked at that way. So I think there's also a bit, and again, they are doing their jobs, but there's also a bit of, let's also show that we're going to be, showing where there's issues as well. And so they want to show that they're doing their jobs, but they don't want to show that they're too much in the back pocket, because that's some of the biggest criticism that they had that was amplified during the Trump years that they want to try to avoid. But this goes back to, again, sort of the way the coverage was towards the end of the Vietnam War. And, it's showing the real things that are happening on the ground. And that is a key aspect of what the media is supposed to do. And this is what the media does best in a lot of ways, is on the ground reporting in these war zones, in the most dangerous places on the entire planet. And the people that risk their lives to go in there to do this should be giving the real information out there, because they're risking everything to be there. And they are, heroes like the people that are fighting on the ground there, to be able to get the story back to the world and to America. But yeah, that's the key thing. They're going to make sure that they don't want to be seen too biased in this case. And you're right, there isn't any way to really whitewash what is going on there. It is a terrible exit for all intents and purposes, and it's just it doesn't look good, and there's no way you can cover that up, really, even if you wanted to.
No, I mean, you can if you're Stephen Colbert, because that's an entertainment show. So that's easy to do. But right. I think, Tamra, there's always this notion that, that the Vietnam War was lost when they lost Walter Cronkite, and some people felt like it wasn't his job to comment. But at the same time, the war was going so badly, how could you not? Just because that's what people didn't expect from newsmen at that point. But in general, I think that, the media is just being observant and going, and there really is this narrative out there of like, oh, all you're doing is beating up on Biden now. I'm like, okay, but is there a reason? Is it, are they beating up on him because it's like, yeah, he likes trains too much, and what's going on with his dog that's been biting people, and let's talk about his son's drug problem. No, this isn't any of that. This is, yes, he can have gotten bad advice, but ultimately he signed off on it, and he's not handling it well. But I don't know. I mean, I think that, do you agree that they're doing their job? Or, and look, we're not talking about Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. We're not talking about opinion. We're talking about like news coverage being negative. I don't know how it couldn't be. Yeah. I think if I were to see something very favorable about how wonderfully it's going, I'm like, well, I don't know that that's a source that I could ever really trust again,
Right. I mean, how could anybody spin that this is going well? I feel like where the tables turned, and I mean, people compare MSNBC to Fox News, but I mean, even MSNBC is not spinning this that like, yes, Biden made the right decision, this is going great. I wonder that where the tables turned, if Trump were still in office and we did this, would they be able to be supportive and say, like, Fox News, would they be saying right now, like, yes, this is what needed to be happening, and the problems that we're seeing now are the faults of the Democrats doing X, Y, and Z. Now, yes, it's great that the media's job is to hold our government, our democracy accountable for, hold our leaders accountable. That is the job of the media. And so much on the right criticizes that they're biased. Now, Christian, I feel like you are more tuned into right-leaning media than I am. So are you saying that that's where the people saying that the media is criticizing Biden, who is that coming from?
No. The it's actually from the far left who feel that the media is being far too critical of Biden.
Okay.
I cast a very wide net in people I interact with through electronic internet means, and I got crazy people on both extremes. But yeah, what I'm seeing is this idea that the media is too excited about really trying to take down Biden with this, and it's like, well, if you loved what they were doing, in opposition to the Trump administration, perhaps it was because they saw shortcomings there, and then they also see them here. And somebody that I know very little, but I can get him to respond to a message once in a while. And I very little. I know Jake Tapper from CNN, and he's somebody that if you were to Google videos of him as the White House, he was the White House correspondent for ABC. The questions that he would ask Obama and his press secretaries, you just see the look on their face, because they're like, this son of a bitch. Like, I thought I had gotten out of here, and then he asked me this. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be it doesn't matter who comes to that podium. You have to ask them really tough questions.
I think people agree that I think people tend to agree that Jake Tapper is a real deal when it comes to the way journalists should.
I like to think so, but then I always find people that feel otherwise. I think everybody should be Trent Krim from The Independent on Ted Lasso. That's what everybody should be. They should ask the really tough questions of everyone. Anyway, we're talking about how long-term this might not be a big ticket item. If you want to talk about another big ticket item, is a very big ticket, but probably doesn't have much staying power. The Democrats are getting towards passing this $3.5 trillion budget bill. And here's the most exciting words you'll ever hear on anything that you watch. Infrastructure plan. I know. Whew. Let's try and cool down a little bit. I know this is some really hot talk, but they were able to vote for this. As with anything, you always have to figure out what happens next. So, you had sort of your more of your centrists that you thought weren't going to get on board, but where do you think we are with this, Scott? And I start with you because, boy, I sure don't know. All the times things like, well, the House is okay with this. Yeah, but the Senate is all right with that. Is this something that's going to get passed? And if it is, or, some version of it, and if it is, what has to actually happen for these, by the way, Tamara, you can cover that $3.5 trillion, right? I know you've got a big trip coming up. You might as well you just go ahead. And the 3.5 trillion, that's on Tamara. And Scott and I'll kick in.
Not yet, but I got a good tip on a horse. So
okay,
probably
that's great.
Pretty soon.
pretty soon. Yeah, you walk up to the window with three. It's like, well, I've got $2 trillion, and I feel like this is really going to pay off. But anyway, Scott, in terms of this, is this what's the likelihood? What has to happen next? And is it something that tangibly people are going to be excited about in any way?
I think, again, and this was some stuff I was just reading up on this morning. The biggest challenge is going to be able to get all the Democrats on the same page, because, again, you've got the moderate Democrats. And of course, when it moves over to the Senate, you have Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema that are going to really try to rein in some of these bigger, big ticket items. But then you also have the progressives that are wanting this wish list to go through. So it's going to be able to corral everybody together in the House right now, especially to get the two parts signed. You have very little wiggle room at all to be able to pass this in the House to bring it back to the Senate. And then at the same time, there are two voting bills that they're trying to get through as well this fall. And those are also very challenging. And we know that without the filibuster changing or making a carve out to those voting laws to be able to pass in the Senate, it's going to be filibustered by the Republicans, and neither one of those are going to pass. So the Democrats have a very ambitious agenda to try to do this fall, because as we know, once we get past the fall and we get into the beginning of 2022, everything is going to be started to focus on the election of the midterms. So they have a very limited window to try to do all this, and even some Democrats are frustrated that the voting rights bills aren't pushed up to the forefront right now. So Nancy Pelosi has her work cut out for her in order to get everybody on the same page with very little room for error at all, because it's so razor thin. And then the same thing, if she's able to manage to get everybody on the same page, which if anyone can do it, it's Nancy Pelosi, bring it back to the Senate for the full vote. And how will that work? And will they be able to keep Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and some of those other moderate senators on the same page, and then still be able to tackle some of these voting right bills that have also now started to go through the House as well? The John Lewis Voting Act went through, and again, no room for error. Every single Democrat voted yes, and every single Republican voted no, and it's about a 6-vote difference. So you can see how tight the margins are.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the biggest challenge more than anything. If you had a lot of members, you could afford to lose a few, but you have no room for error. And that's what makes this particularly challenging on these infrastructure bills. So you have 2 infrastructure bills, and then you also have 2 voting rights bills happening at the same time.
Right. And in terms of the infrastructure bill, I have we've seen a lot of this, the 220 to 212 party line vote. Tamra, obviously the lack of flexibility, the lack of wiggle room is really the idea that you have your centrists and more moderates who are like, instead of $3.5 trillion, how about I don't know, $1 trillion. And then you can have, more extreme, you can have, no, we've got a plan that calls for about $90 trillion. And we think you should probably get a little close to that. Do you think Speaker of the House with this small of a majority is a fun job that you'd like to take on in your next life?
Sure. Yes, I would
Okay,
I would like to be Speaker of the House. Yes.
Excellent.
When we're talking about trillions of dollars, it's just such an astronomical amount of money to whether you believe that this is an investment in our future, which I do, or whether you think that what do they say, we're giving we're just passing a debt onto future generations. It's like, when we're in that amount of money, and you think that we're passing this debt on to future generations, whether it's 1 trillion or 3 trillion, how is there a difference there to you? It's an investment in our future. It's what we need right now. And I feel like the squabbling over the little pieces of the bills now, it's just plain politics, because this is something that just needs to get passed.
Yeah, and I think that you're able to sort of get this through. But Scott, you're talking about these voting rights bills, and I don't think that they don't have a chance, because you're going to lose at least one Democrat in the House. So you're not going to really be able to advance those, right?
No, like I said, I think they will be able to advance them out of the House, and it went by.
Oh yeah, but once I'm talking about in the Senate, though, that's
Lisa Murkowski actually supported, is supportive. I mean, it hasn't been voted on some of these voting right bills, so I wouldn't put it past that there may be a couple of people that may switch. And again, there may be a place to where there's some tweaking that is done to the bill before it's voted on finally that might get a couple people back on board. And also, we'd have to look at, would they make a carve out like they did for judicial appointments and other things that just need a simple majority that could then take out the filibuster in this case, because obviously if the filibuster is in place, then it would have no chance of passing with Republicans. So those are a lot of things that are going to have to be determined, and that's why a lot of Democrats are frustrated, because they're using a lot of bandwidth. I kind of joke about it, but they're actually having to work right now, because these bills are very big, huge bills with the infrastructure, and are really having to go through and hammer out deals here. And it is a lot of work to get these ginormous bills. I mean, this infrastructure bill is the biggest in generations if it passes. So there is a lot of stuff that's happening. And I know the Democrats also want to go back to the midterms and say, hey, look, we worked hard, and if you elect more of us, we can do even more. We did a huge infrastructure bill that Republicans and Donald Trump talked about year after year during his era. And now we're working on voting rights bills. So they want to be able to get this stuff done to be able to go back to the voters in 22 and say, we did stuff. Unlike the Republicans who just say no and don't vote for things, we're actually making things happen and making things better for everyday Americans. So there is going to be a consensus on trying to make that happen this fall, but they have a lot of work cut out for them. And it'll be interesting to see how these final bills, especially the second 3.5 trillion one, ends up being, and if other things are taken out to make it more palatable for some of the more moderates to be able to vote on it. So there's a lot of hard work ahead for them to get on the same page here.
Before we finish up, I wanted to talk briefly that one, I have still not done the research to figure out how to pronounce the new governor of New York's name, Kathy Hochul, but still don't know how to say it. Sorry.
You said it. That's fine. That's what it is.
But I really wanted to have a to it, but I don't think it does, and I think that's why I'm disappointed. But anyway, she was sworn in as the first female governor of New York. Where to get with the times, New York. But she immediately announced plans to mandate masks for everyone entering schools and vaccinations for school employees. Or, as we always say, Scott, there is the or you get tested every week. And Tamra, what do you think about this? Your first act as governor is, let's obviously people in New York City, there'll be plenty of people who feel okay with this. But as somebody who is from the other part of the state that is, not this tiny little part down here at the bottom, it's not being received well across the board. But we live in a state where we're essentially seeing this. I don't know if that's not a statewide mandate here, but it's Los Angeles County is the masks, because I feel like Orange County is not. If I had to guess, they're not enforcing that. But what do you think about
Ventura County? They added that.
Oh, they did. Yeah, because you're on the border with Ventura County, so you always know what's going on, whether or not you're allowed to go to a gym.
You're on the border with Ventura? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, I
didn't realize you live so far away.
That's why he's able to still be on the show, because we do it over, well, not Zoom, but over StreamYard. Wow. Imagine if Scott had to try and get to that studio still. Scott's actually still looking for parking from the last time we did a show there last March. But Tamra, obviously there is a lot of there is a mindset that this is very important, and as always, someone with two small children who are under vaccination age, I say, yeah, that's the least you can do. But that's my opinion. What do you think about, sort of taking this as your first step? Like, thanks for swearing me in, and now here's what we're gonna do.
I'm always in favor of any politician making a strong. I feel like when politicians try to be temperate and try to make everybody happy, that's when nothing seems to get accomplished. And I'm always in favor of a politician making putting their foot down, putting her heel down. So I think this is a good thing. Obviously I am pro mask. I feel that this is in schools. Educators, superintendents, they all seem to be in agreement that, this is something that needs to happen in schools. So if she made this decision because she is listening to the people who have authority on the subject, I mean, that's what a politician's job is. So I think she's starting out with a bang.
Then let's look at the sort of the other side of this, Scott. If here in California, if Gavin Newsom is recalled and Larry Elder is sworn in. On his first day, he will probably make sure that everybody knows that.
You think that's who would get? That's who it would be.
A lot of people feel. I mean, he's polling at like 20%, and that's more than enough. If enough people vote yes, and because you can easily win this recall election with 20% vote.
Yeah.
I mean, Schwarzenegger actually had like a sizable, I think, percentage, but obviously the huge flaw in the system is how easy it is to win, and I think. Maybe next week or the week after.
Waiting for Angeline to take the lead. I think it's going to be her.
Yeah. Well, and then there's also this notion that that obviously Newsom's people want all Democrats to just vote no, but as we've talked about, you can still pick someone from the list just in case, and there are Democrats on that list. So I don't know if that's good messaging, but that's not why I bring it up. I bring it up because. A new governor could come in here and then just be like, great, ain't nobody wearing masks.
I just want to clarify, if there's any Los Angeles County Democrat watching this show right now, vote no and do not vote for, just don't vote for any of the.
I mean, it would probably, we should have Drexel on. He'll tell us what we should do because I trust
That's what
Drexel.
He said to me, yes, he told me.
He said just vote no.
Vote no and leave the second part blank.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's sort of what the
here's what's going to be hard for him to argue with. I'm going to vote no, but then I'm going to write Drexel Hurd. So is he going to tell me to not vote for him? That's going to be
the Democrats that are listed they're listed as Democrats for the sake of hoping that somebody will be like, oh well, I guess I'll just vote for this Democrat. You do not want those people in office.
Yeah. Well, how about we just don't have anybody in office anyway? But so this idea that there could be a Republican governor that takes over, it seems like the masks and vaccines is the sort of the reflexive thing right now. And somewhere in the weeks ahead, we're going to talk to our friend Sam Whitfield, who actually lives in Florida, and I know that he in general he likes DeSantis. I literally couldn't think of his name for a second, which is interesting how much his name is in the news. And I'm like, what's that guy's name? Oh, yeah. But what do you think? Do you feel like that's the first thought I had is like, hey, how could this affect me? I don't think my school board would change their mind, but a Republican who suddenly became governor of California would absolutely do the reverse of what Kathy Hochul just did, right?
Who are you asking?
I'll ask Scott first.
Oh, you're saying like if
yeah, and I'm using Larry Elder as the example, but a Republican takes over from Gavin Newsom. I feel like this would be the first thing that they would do is the opposite and just be like, yep, no more masks, vaccines only if you want them.
Oh, sure. I mean, obviously that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's just going to be a fight back and forth for the year, a little over, year plus until the Democrat takes over again. So I could see a lot of lawsuits happening. I can see a lot of the supermajority and the Democrats trying to overturn vetoes. It would just be very messy. So any of the Republicans that think that somehow this is going to make things better for them by doing this runaround play because they can't win in a normal election are going to sort of be sadly mistaken, because yes, he can do a lot of damage and he can do a lot of changes and he can try to implement some of these laws and everything, but it's just going to be tied up and you're going to have a supermajority on the Democratic side to be able to overturn a lot of these things. So it's just going to be very messy for a year plus, and then he's going to be voted out.
Yeah.
The only thing would be is if you got someone like a Kevin Faulconer that could come in that's more moderate and more of the California vein of Republicanism that might be able to work with Democrats and might be more palatable for independents to vote for in 2022. But someone like Larry Elder is just going to be a mess, and all it does is just make the Republicans excited for the midterms to be able to try him around.
Look, there's
Trump.
There's one thing that California does really well on the state level, and that's make sure that very little happens. The wheels will grind to a halt, and lots of lots of committee hearings and votings and all the stuff that Scott's talking about. Yeah, I mean, I think that for look, we live in Los Angeles County. I don't think that whoever the governor is going to really change the approach that's taken here. And as it relates to DeSantis, the one thing that I will say is that there's one state in the union where COVID deaths are up from a year ago, and that state is Florida. So
that's why I'm curious when your friend Sam Whitfield is on the show, because he did specifically deny one time when we were talking about that cases are up in Florida.
Yeah. Well, there was 1 week that they misreported, and he's right about that week. That was that week. And it's hard, and then some people are like, oh, so they're wrong about that.
Up. They misreported to
they just weren't the highest.
Yes, they were.
You're right. They were still up, but they weren't the highest of all time. Now I believe the weekly death rate is the highest of all time. So that's something that I'm very interested in talking about in the future. I think we'll talk a little bit more about California before that, but I know that we will definitely get a chance to talk with Sam. And then just sort of a very lighthearted headline, because again, when nobody gets hurt, we can laugh about it. But Scott, where did it go? Scott, I see you made the news. A man discovered passed out in a car in a 7-Eleven parking lot, had guns, drugs, and over 300 California recall ballots. So congratulations, Scott.
Thank you. I took my Florida man and repackaged it for California.
Yeah, you said Florida man, hold my beer.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
hold my coconut water.
I know, and if you live in California, you already have your ballots. And it's funny because I have a very conservative friend who posted a photo of him, taking his ballot to the mail. And there were multiple comments on his post about like, no, you have to vote in person. And I'm like, oh, that really is their mindset, is that, voting early.
They don't think it's going to be his vote will be counted by mailing
That's exactly what they think. that they're gonna steam the envelope open and throw his vote away when they see who he voted for. I did not mean to bring that back up. Oh, but Tamra is not going to be with us next week because she's taking a trip, and I'm very jealous. But we will miss you. If people want to keep tabs on you, I don't know if they have TikTok where you're going, but where can they follow you?
I would like people to follow me on Instagram. You need to build up some padding there. So Instagram on Hey Tamra.
So TikTok's still happening, but we're just plugging the Instagram.
TikTok's still happening, but my following grows this. Sorry to say, but my following.
You don't need us. I get it. No, you don't need us to send people.
It's healthy on TikTok.
Yeah.
But
our demographic is more the Instagram crowd.
See some love to my Instagram.
Yeah. And, the people that watch this show would like to know, where's your live journal? Where's your Friendster? And of course, MySpace. You can just tweet at her and ask all those. And Scott, the S-Man himself, S-Man 80. And you haven't been fighting with anybody lately, have you?
Not as much lately.
Yeah,
I've just been a little bit personally busy, but some of these things happen in the world with all the craziness going on. I'll be sure to pop in and start a few fights because some of my followers do miss that.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ, and please subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. You get the titular Blackcast, and a little later today, Marvel Movie Talk, where we will be breaking down the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer, and there's a trailer for the Eternals. And I saw Shang-Chi, and it was amazing. And the third episode of What If is half hour, the biggest garbage I've ever watched. So watch me not be a homer for a change. So all that at 2 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. And follow us on social media. We will be sure to let you know what time you can tune in for our next episode and any schedule changes that come. But until then, thanks so much, everybody. And